Councillor will give you starting motion.
Fully engaged.
Ms. Martin, can you please confirm that we're live on YouTube?
Just waiting for confirmation.
Councillors, once we have confirmation that we're live on YouTube, we'll begin.
Sorry. Still waiting. It's not coming up live as yet. Sorry.
Councillors, just a reminder as we're waiting, please, when you're speaking, if I can ask you to make sure that your microphone's turned on and you're not too close or too far away from your microphone. When you're finished speaking, please turn your microphone off.
Two seconds down time. Back at down here we have Bonnie Smith, who's our new admin support in economic development. So Bonnie's only been on the board for so I thought we'd get a popular meeting and see how we go.
So is that Ronnie short for Ronald or Veronica?
Bonnie.
I was thinking, no, it's just straight Bonnie.
Oh, okay. Bonnie or Ronnie?
Bonnie.
Oh, Bonnie. I thought it was Ronnie and I was like, it's short.
Thank you.
Veronica.
Okay, thank you, councillors. Now, for your attention, I'd like to declare our April ordinary meeting of council opened at 4:32. To those in the gallery, welcome to our April meeting from both the general public as well as from the Gunnedah Times. Welcome, councillors and executive team. So it's great to have you here. I'd like to start by acknowledging, or start with an acknowledgement of country. And I'd like to acknowledge the Kamilaroi people as traditional custodians of the land on which we gather, and pay my respects to elders both past and present, and to any Indigenous community members who may be with us or listening on YouTube this afternoon. Now, if I could please ask you all to stand for a minute. Eternal God, our loving Father, we come to Thee this day in the name of Jesus Christ, who is the lover of our souls and the Saviour of all mankind. May we feel His love and respond to it. May His Spirit shine in lives that are darkened by worry, doubt or fear. Strengthen and guide those who are trying to do what is right. Make it plain to them. Make us more mindful of the needs of our fellow men and less absorbed in selfish concerns, that Christ may approve and bless what we do here this day. We ask these blessings in His name. Amen. Please be seated. Our councillors, next item on the agenda is bereavements, and we mourn the loss of residents in our community between the 18th of March and the 21st of April. So we mourn the loss of Patricia Alison Hobson, Francis Ann Herbert, Henry Charles Hubbard, Eleanor May Brevet, Colin James Sims, Faye Therese Smart, Robert Herbert Hodges, Wilfred Robert Bruce Watterson, Michael Charles Fresnel, Ronald Herbert Croft, and Yvonne Ruth Harding. So, councillors, executive team, and friends in the gallery, if you could please stand with me for 1 minute silence as we extend our condolences to the family and friends of the deceased. Thank you. Please be seated. Our next item on the agenda is for those present. Apologies. I believe we have all councillors, elected members with us this afternoon. Director of Corporate Community Services is unwell, so we have an acting in Ms. McLean for our April meeting. So next on the agenda is confirmation of previous minutes of ordinary meeting held on Wednesday the 17th of March 2021. I call for elected member to move Sean, correct? Thank you, Councillor Moses, and seconded by Councillor. I'll put that motion. All in favour? Aye. Against? That motion carried. Moving on to declarations of interest in relation to the business paper. We have received several, as you'll see on the screen, declarations. Once I read these out, I'll bring further declarations. First declaration we have is from Councillor Campbell in relation to item 10.2, request for sponsorship for INEX. It's listed as a pecuniary interest, therefore Councillor Campbell will be leading the chambers during that discussion and determination. And the reason is that his son is a member of the organising committee. Councillor Hook, also for item 10.2, for request for sponsorship, has declared an interest of significant but non-pecuniary. And the reason is that he's the chair of that committee. Councillor Hook, I take it you'll be leaving the room for...
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next we have Councillor Swain in relation to item 11.5, submission, inquiry into prudential regulation of investment in Australian export industries. It's a less than significant non-pecuniary declaration, as her son works for Whitehaven and son-in-law works for Whitehaven Coal. Councillor Swain, will you be remaining in the chambers?
No, I'll be leaving.
You'll be also leaving the chambers. Thank you. Councillor Keith is the next declaration for the same item, 11.5, listed as a pecuniary interest, as his employer is mentioned in the submission, and Councillor Keith, as its pecuniary, will be leaving the chambers for that discussion and determination, as will I. I have a declaration in the same item, and the reason is companies that I own supply goods and services to the company noted within the submission, Whitehaven Coal. When I leave the room, the Deputy Mayor will take the chair and will be chairing for that item. I'll now call, are there any further declarations of interest from either councillors or senior staff in relation to the business paper? There are no further declarations. Thank you. We'll move forward. Next item on the agenda is community presentations. And we have one this evening, and that's in relation to item 11.5, that's submission, and that's from Mr. Peter Wills. So would you like to come forward now? Mr. Wills, you're familiar with protocol at council meeting. You've been here before. As you're aware, the microphone will be there for you to speak into. You'll have 5 minutes to make your presentation, and then I'll afford the councillors an opportunity if they need any clarity around any of your address. So over to you, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I would have printed this today, but it's been a little bit busy in Breezer. I speak against item 5, submission to the inquiry into the prudential regulation of investment in Australia's export industries. What is presented here to me in your council papers is a particularly one-sided aspect of the facts. And I bring several relevant points that appear to be omitted from the detail of this report to council influencing the letter to the inquiry. First, I would refer you to some counter-arguments that are in play in the media that might factor into arguments as to why the banking industry might seek to transition its financing of certain industries. I quote here from a Sydney Morning Herald article from just Monday. Global coal demand is projected to decline over the next 40 years. Treasury's report on productivity states. From the Sydney Morning Herald on January 20, some detail as to why the banking industry might withdraw support. And I quote, BHP, the nation's largest miner, will slash up to 1.6 billion from the value of its Australian thermal coal mine amid weaker coal market conditions and continuing efforts to offload the asset. I continue from the article. The miner told shareholders it would take heavy write-downs on its Mount Arthur coal mine. It continues. BHP has been seeking to divest the Mount Arthur coal mine under a push to clean up the resources giant's global portfolio and reposition the business for a lower carbon future. There is much commentary for you to choose from, and I will refer you to an article in the Financial Times, a global broadsheet newspaper from October 2020. I've got copies here for you all, written by Sydney-based journalist Jamie Smythe. The headline here reads, Australia's banks stop funding coal as trading partners decarbonise. The article opens with, the last of Australia's big 4 banks has said it will stop financing thermal coal projects as the country's big trading partners seek to cut emissions. That follows decisions from mining groups Rio Tinto and BHP to exit thermal coal in response to growing investor pressure over climate change. Then, interesting enough, the Financial Times article continues exactly word for word, line by line, as your final comments written here. To me, the report's final comments have been written not by the South Gunnedah Shire Council, but by the journalists of the Financial Times. Yet your council report here has presented only half the commentary and omitted aspects of balance. There's a quote from the ANZ Chief Executive that states, the rationale for the bank's anticipated transition from lending to the coal sector, and I quote, ANZ Chief Executive Shane Elliott, this is good old-fashioned risk management. We've seen announcements from some of our biggest coal markets, for example, like Japan. We just can't sit by and ignore that. That is the Chief Executive of the ANZ Bank. There are too many biased aspects of the report in your council papers and the letter to number in the time provided. But I refer to mentions such as agriculture that aren't particularly at risk of the bank's withdrawal support to the finance for coal mining. In fact, agriculture might even flourish at the financial demise, especially around areas of, say, Emerald Hill and Breezer. And I wrote this last night, so it's changed a little bit, I guess, in regards to Breezer today. This council should note reality. The market pressures and its forces and other business transition plans over the next 2 decades, and council should urge the remaining industry components to sensibly transition, as other large key players are, as outlined, and are doing both internally in Australia and globally. I urge Gunnedah Council to perhaps try again with their analysis and not ignore relevant facts on the table. I urge councillors to reject this half-hearted submission to the inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Wills. Now, elected members, if you'd like to ask a question or you need any clarity around any of what you've just heard from Mr. Wills, please now. There are no questions? Terrific. Yes, thank you. Okay, councillors, next on the agenda is a mayoral minute. Look, I won't labour this because I know you're all very responsible in your positions as elected members and you've read through quite thoroughly my report. So I will just be really quickly as I present this forward. You'll see that the recommendation I put forward is that council endorse the 3 positions of advocacy listed in this report for submission to the New South Wales Country Mayors Association Executive for discussion and debate at the 28th of May meeting. Now, councillors, there are 3 motions. Just quickly, the first motion is that the New South Wales Country Mayors Association call on the federal government to formally acknowledge that rural and remote New South Wales local government areas are being seriously disadvantaged due to the critical lack of general practitioners. 2, increase the Medicare payment to general practitioners who choose to practice in rural and remote regions of New South Wales. And 3, reduce the Medicare payments to general practitioners practicing in metropolitan areas to offset the increased expenditure in rural and remote New South Wales. You'll note in my final paragraph of the commentary that I've stated, without a significant disturbance to the current status quo of how general practitioners structure their financial models and operate their business across New South Wales, attracting, retaining and training general practitioners in rural and remote New South Wales will only move from a critically low situation to a catastrophic position, and more Australian, more importantly, more rural Australian lives will be put at risk. Second motion reads that the New South Wales Country Mayors Association call on the New South Wales Government to establish a new ministry called the Ministry for Regional Health, with responsibility for driving urgent improvements to health services in regional, rural and remote New South Wales. Again, I'll refer you to the last paragraph of my commentary on that. And I've suggested here that should the suggested motion in this report for the establishment of a new ministry for regional health be supported, it would place the health outcomes in rural, regional and remote New South Wales at the highest level of priority in the New South Wales Government by charging a minister and a ministry team with the sole responsibility of delivering on endorsed recommendations from the current Public Health Inquiry and any further identified actions that will make immediate improvements to the livelihoods of regional, rural and remote Australians. The third motion I put forward in my amendment to councillors is that the New South Wales Country Mayors Association call on the New South Wales Government to engage with the network of 13 joint organisations across New South Wales to support local water utilities and provide strategic and evidence-based approach to address water security and the investment of infrastructure required for the economic development of regional, rural and remote New South Wales. I've listed 2 opportunities for further collaboration there. First one being funding to support the establishment of strategic plans for each joint organisation to prioritise the critical infrastructure requirements to ensure that critical water needs for communities and the economic activation throughout regional, rural and remote New South Wales. And the second point is to collaborate in the development of skills and training for careers in water and wastewater treatment within local government. So councillors, I put that before you. I move that motion with no requirement for a seconder. So now I'll open for any questions or comments before I put the motion.
Well, I'll make a comment, Mr. Chairman, that quite clearly, as we all know, because those of us who have conversations about this on a daily basis, that the issue of medical issues in our community is a priority for the bulk of probably our community, but particularly those of my age and older. It's almost a single topic of conversation in some of the conversations that I have. I go a little bit further with regard to motion 1, whilst I see that what you're getting out there by making the Medicare payments to practice higher in rural remote areas rather than the metropolitan. I would go to the extent of even suggesting that only giving priority numbers to those who are prepared to serve for a minimum amount of time in the rural areas would be something we should look seriously about, but I won't bother delaying this to us tonight here necessarily. The other thing is I think we should be asking the Commonwealth or the state government or both to provide scholarships to students who are undertaking medical training who are prepared to go to rural areas for a specific period of time to commence their careers. to someday, they're sort of moving a bit in that direction, but I think it needs to be a more clearly, the scholarship will only be given if they go to rural areas. Now, that means, of course, we would rely on not beginning GPs, but you would hope that there would be still more experienced GPs to introduce them into the practice in our areas. So, I don't know, we might wish to add those two items, but if not, I'm happy to support what's here, because at least it is an attempt by us to raise it with the country mayors, and hopefully they as a group will adopt a similar approach and carry more weight than an individual council like ours.
Thank you, Councillor Haslett, for your support and those extra items. I did not only do research as putting these forward, but also sought advice from the minister, federal minister, and he did speak about some of those particular items you talk about and actions with the Murray-Darling doctor school that they've actually got established in Dubbo, and effectively he passed on to me that it was almost impossible to dictate that at this point in time, but that certainly is the actions or the outcomes that you articulated are certainly the ones that they're aiming for. So some work is being done there. I do appreciate the support. Any further questions or comments, councillors?
Just a quick comment, Mr Mayor, just along the lines of Councillor Haslett. This is a good first step, or 44th step, or however it's taken to get to this stage. I think that those other further things that Councillor Haslett has mentioned will be picked up along the way, because it will be discussed in country meetings. So it's a good step and a good first step, and I think it's something we've got to keep pushing for, and if this doesn't work, then we need to push somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swan. I appreciate your support as well. Any further questions before I put this motion? Be the case, put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you, unanimously supported. Moving on, item number 9 on our agenda, 9.1, the General Manager's reports. And shortly I'll call Mr. Groff to detail his recommendation. The 9.1 is the 2021 National General Assembly of Local Government Conference. And we do have a recommendation before you, and I'll ask the General Manager to please detail it.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good evening, everyone. The recommendation simply asks that the Mayor be authorised to attend the conference.
Thank you, Mr. Groff. I'll call for a move of that motion. I've got hands everywhere. Moved by Councillor Swain, seconded by Councillor Luke. Councillor Swain, Mr. Member, you wish to speak?
No, Mr Mayor, thank you.
Do I have an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion and ask a question? Councillor Luke, as a seconder, do you wish to speak?
Only to say that I hope you're coping with all the running around that you actually do, but I think it's a really important thing for councils and towns in regional areas to be at all of these things that they can, because there's a lot of advocacy that's very important for us.
Thank you for your inquiry, Councillor Luke. At times, the workload certainly is a strain, but you're correct. I agree 100%. The National General Assembly is one that brings representatives from right throughout Australia in one location over a few day period, and it is great to hear some of the exciting things that are happening right across Australia, and I've certainly learned myself in the time that I've been in the role, and I think that has been an advantage to us as a community as well. So thank you. And councillors, in saying that, I'll now put the motion on favour. Against? That motion carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brock. Moving on, item number 10, which is the Director of Corporate and Community Services report. We have acting in that role this evening, Ms. McLean. And we have 4 reports, starting with the first report of the 2017 to 2022 delivery program and operational plan. I'll hand to Ms. McLean to detail the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon. The draft 2017 to 2022 delivery program has been expanded to 5 years. The program establishes a series of actions and programs for council to deliver during the current term of office. The plan articulates council's commitment to delivering on its areas of responsibility under the community's strategic plan. And supporting the delivery program is the annual operational plan, which presents a series of annual tasks for council officers, along with council's budget, fees and charges, rating structure and revenue policy. The recommendation is that the draft delivery program and operational plan be publicly exhibited for 28 days pursuant to the Local Government Act.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. I'll now call for elected member. Thank you, Councillor Campbell has moved the recommendation, become a motion, and seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Campbell, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do I have elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion? Councillor Moses, to second the motion, Mr. Smith.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillors, just before I put this motion, with your indulgence, I'd just like to say a couple of quick words. Firstly, as you'll see in my introduction in this document, I've listed the fact that this is an extended period, one that we, when we were elected, didn't know that we were going to have a 5th year, and that's also because of COVID-19, one of those major effects. And I've finished my introduction by saying that I wanted to reassure our community that we are still 100% committed to deliver all that we've stated in our operational and delivery plan, and that we will continue to advocate as strongly as possible on the behalf of our community on all issues that affect us. So not just those financial infrastructure and other great things that we do at council, but the position that we take on critical things that affect our community that we don't necessarily have control over, like health, like those issues that I've just talked about in the mayoral minute that we put forward and advocate strongly for. And we'll continue to do that. And we'll make sure that we've got a great plan in place for the incoming council post the elections that will happen on the 4th of September later this year. But also I wanted to highlight one thing and put that on the record, and that is the significant size of the projects or the delivery program that we have for this year that we're coming, $47 million. Normally our operational budget typically would be something between 7 and 10 at the absolute most. So for this year coming in, $47 million, it must be noted the exceptional work of not only the elected members in this room, but also this organisation led by the General Manager and everybody within the team that has a significant role to play to make sure that we can deliver that on behalf of our community. So it's a great read, fantastic results, and we are 100% committed to continue to deliver for our community. In saying that, thank you for your indulgence, councillors. So now I put that motion on in favour.
Aye.
Against? Unanimously supported. Thank you. Moving right along. We have a declaration of interest from both Councillor Campbell and Councillor Hook for this next item. Please let the record show that both councillors have left the chambers for the discussion, debates and therefore determination. Councillors, this item is 10.2, request for sponsorship for IMEX, and I'll hand back to Mr. McLean to detail the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In February 2020, Council resolved to accept the opportunity as a major sponsor for the conduct of the 2020 Energy Innovation Mining Expo and make an in-kind contribution of $11,000 and a cash contribution of $7,000 on the proviso that the event is held. Obviously, subsequent to that, COVID-19 occurred, so the event was postponed. Should Council wish to offer sponsorship for this year's event, the recommendation is that the resolution be revoted to reflect the current year.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. I'll now put Councillor Luke, you'd like to move that motion. Thank you. Do I have a
If I
second?
can, with your indulgence, Mr. Mayor, I would actually like to expand on that motion with an extra little bit to say and provide a report to council with feedback on the expo and value to the Gunnedah and resulting value to the Gunnedah community. Happy to take somebody's better words if they've got them.
I'm happy enough to support that, Mr. Chairman. I'll get some research.
Thank you. Look, if we could just let Ms Markey complete the wording. Councillor Luke, Councillor Luke, if you're moving, could you just clarify that you're happy with the wording on screen?
Yes, I am. I'm going to see if my colleagues can come up with something better. Thank you.
And seconded by Councillor Haslam. Can you confirm with the wording on screen? Content.
Provide a post-event report.
What's the business now? Post the event.
Someone like me will just give you a wonderful report of nothing related.
Post the event, that's quite fine. We're happy with that too. Beginning with the
Councillor Luke, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that we have, there's a number of similar sorts of events that this council has been supporting, such as the Chamber of Commerce and their Spirit of Christmas Fair, and getting some feedback afterwards on what sort of value for money we're getting and the follow-on effect, both economically and socially to the Gunnedah community. Is always worthwhile for this council to have that information. So if we can have that report, will be a good thing.
Thank you, Councillor Luke. Do I have an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question? Councillor Hazard has seconded the motion. Who's to speak?
Mr. Member.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I looked at this one very carefully. I probably prepared to support it, and that's why I seconded it on the grounds that it was carried last year, and because of circumstances it wasn't able to be implemented last year. I had to do a bit of research, and I think in the past, when we've been asked for support from community organisations, we have usually asked for their balance sheets. So I had a bit of an investigation. I noted on the meeting on Tuesday the 9th of March this year that the Economics Committee had a cash balance of 85,000, which was broken down to available cash funds of sponsorship 37,000, trade space deposits 1,620, and cash remaining 46,460. And I was interested to note that the Show Society sought a loan of up to 45,000 from that figure for the conduct of this year's show, which I found interesting, that one group is providing sponsorship to the other, and yet we're being asked to provide sponsorship also to IMEX itself. So I think it's important that we do understand just exactly how much people or organisations have when they ask for funding. But as I said, on this particular basis, because we said we supported last year, it won't be this council that will be making the decision based on the report that they may receive about a future request. It will be a new council. That would be interesting to see what they would have, but I would be a bit reluctant to do it a third time. But as I say, because it was now, we'd already granted support last year, and it shouldn't take place. I would support it this year with the caveat that it would be difficult to convince me that such should I be sitting around this table in 2022.
I'd be clearly interested, Mr. Chairman. I just realised that my brother had just taken a position, and I've only just heard that, so I'm extremely interested in leaving before any discussion.
Councillors, and for those listening that may not be aware, may not have heard, Councillor Swain has made a late declaration of interest before any determinations have been made. She's just realised that her granddaughter has taken a position with this organisation. Ms. Markey, let the record show that Councillor Swain has declared an interest in left the room. I'll now call for any further elected members who might like to ask a question or speak against the motion. Councillor King.
Actually intend to speak for the motion, Mr. Mayor, which I know will close debate, so I'm happy to do so with your indulgence, and looking just to answer a couple of questions Councillor Hazlitt may validly raised. When we previously supported the first running of this IMEX event some time ago, we actually, as part of that support, indicated that 2 councillors must serve on there would be 2 council representatives serve on the committee for IMEX, and that was Councillor Hook and myself who were the representatives at that time. So with a little bit of prior knowledge, the IMEX committee is actually a fully fledged component of the Government Show Society. It's in fact one of the same organisations, it's a subcommittee of the same. So effectively, IMEX's committee money is the Show Society's money. And also, the other point I would make is that us taking up the sponsorship opportunities, similar to what it is with the Shop Local campaign, the Spirit of Christmas Fair, is a commercial opportunity for the council. And as we've done, it's a commercial proposition to put the council for sponsorship, and as we've done with the Chamber of Commerce, by requiring a report to come back to us after the event, it clearly articulates what the benefit we may or may not have received from that sponsorship for the community, and we cannot support the event and are opposed to doing so.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillors, I've now went through the motion. All in favour? Call that unanimously supported. Thank you. Catherine, may I ask you please ask the councillors to rejoin us in the chamber. Please let the record show that Councillor Hook, Councillor Campbell and Councillor Swain have rejoined us in the chamber. We'll move on to our next item, councillors, 10.3, Arts and Cultural Grant Assessment Panel, and I'll hand back to Mr. McLean to detail the recommendation report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Arts and Cultural Grants Policy exists, and application forms and guidelines have been distributed and publicised through media channels. Application closed on the 27th of April with assessment planned to take place shortly after in readiness for the May 21 council meeting. And we seek the appointment of 3 councillors to serve on the Arts and Cultural Grants Assessment Panel. The recommendation is to appoint 3 councillors to that panel.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Councillors, before we go any further, I call for nominations for the 3 vacant positions. Councillor O'Keefe.
I'll happily nominate Councillor Luke.
Councillor Luke, do you wish to accept the nomination?
I will, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Call for further nominations.
Nominate Councillor Hazlitt.
Councillor Haslett, you've been nominated. Would you like to accept the nomination?
Yes.
I'll call for a third nomination.
Councillor Campbell?
Councillor Campbell, you've been nominated. Would you like to accept the nomination?
I can't think.
More better.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillors, we have 3 nominations for 3 positions, but I will call. Are there any further nominations, councillors? Last call, any further nominations? Councillors, we have a recommendation before you that reads that councillors Luke, Hasler and Campbell be appointed to the Arts and Cultural Grants Assessment Panel. I'll now call for elected member to move that recommendation to become a motion. Thank you, Councillor Moses, seconded by Councillor Fuller. Councillor Moses is the mover of the motion. Do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion. I ask a question. Councillor Fuller is the second of the motion. Do you wish to speak?
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Be the case with the motion. All in favour? Against? I'll call that unanimously supported. We'll move on to our last item, Mr. McLean, which is item 10.4, Outstanding Resolution Register.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report provides a list of past resolutions that have not been completed, and the recommendation is that the information be received and noted.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. I now call for elected member to move the recommendation to become a motion.
I'll move it that way, Mr. Chairman, so I can have the opportunity to ask a couple of questions.
Do I have a second? Do I have a second? Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hasler, you may announce.
The item on the page 37, labelled CMCA site, the term aggressive doesn't provide something, provides great deal of information. Are we making progress, something beyond progress there, or what's the likely outcome at the moment?
Through Mr Mayor, can I have that resolution number again, please? Councillor Haslett?
It's on page, page 37.
12.06/20.
Page 37 in the business.
Yeah, thanks. Through you, Mr Mayor, and through to you, Councillor Haslett, we are making progress on that. There's obviously a lot of things, a lot of issues in the area at the moment with that particular development in terms of a rezoning proposal and a DA, as well as the lease and MOU. We have been in regular contact with the gentleman from the CNCO who's our liaison officer, and I'm fairly comfortable making good progress.
Thank you. I understand there's only one submission, so I think there's not much to do. In terms of the page 40, the Porcupine Fire Program, would like to request a copy of that particular completed program, which is listed on page 40. Following the consultation with residents and the Urban Land Care Group and the RFS, I presume that will be publicly available document.
So it's bottom on page 39.
Thank you, Councillor Haslett, for your question, and through you, Mr Mayor. The document can be made available for councillors, however, it should be understood that it is an operational document, so it does need to remain with councillors.
I look forward to looking at it. Thank you. And on page 43, 33.02-21, the installation of gates at Libby's Place. I'm told it's, I read that it's 30% completed after 2 months. If we're using my maths, that means it's going to take another 5 months to complete this. Is it possible that we may get those gates in the near future rather than in months down the track?
Thank you, Councillor Haslett, for the question. Through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, that's correct. There's staff in the process at the moment of procuring a suitable style latching gate.
I thank you, Mr Chairman. 3 gates shouldn't take too long.
Thank you, councillors. Any further questions or comments? Councillor O'Keefe.
Through Mr Mayor, I have a question, so we've got Mr Bartlett again. At the bottom of page 25 of our business paper, I'm looking at item 16.04/18. And it starts with dog off leash area. And if we go all to the right hand side, what we actually decided to do was make that part of the open space strategy, and that is really the purpose of my question. I haven't quickly enough found the open space strategy motion to ask you about it, but where are we up to in that? Certainly remember participating in our consultative session some time ago.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe, for the question, and through you, Mr Mayor. Staff are expecting to receive a draft copy of the open space strategy within the next week. So we should be in a position to have a further conversation with the councillors and the community very shortly.
Thank you, councillors. Any further questions before I put the motion? The case for the motion, all in favour? Against? Unanimously supported. Thank you, Mr Plain, for your contribution. Moving on to item number 11, which is the Director of Planning and Environmental Services reports. I'll call Mr Johns to detail his recommendations, starting with item 11.1, which is Business Partner Program Round 3 of 2020-2021. Mr Johns.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Through you, as the Mayor outlined, this relates to the latest round of the Business Partner Program, which is round 3 for the current financial year. There's a recommendation there that the council endorse the recommendation of the advisory group, which is that touch over almost $28,000 be allocated in grants to 10 local businesses based on the applications received, and further that $15,788 of unspent funds be transferred to the restricted asset.
Thank you, Mr Johns. I now call for the Thank you, Councillor Luke. Move the motion and seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Luke, as a mover, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I would like to thank the members of the committee, including those councillors in this room that are also on the committee. It's a lot of hard work, and it's wonderful to see those funds moving out into the businesses.
Well, elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Moses is the second of the motion. You wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Be the case, put the motion on in favour.
I've got a question.
You may speak.
On page 53, just above financial implications, I found it difficult to talk about youngs. The current balance is 48,355. The allocation for 2022 is 40. It says if the transfer approved, the total allocation available for 21-22 is 64. I don't know where that maths comes from. What's
So through you, Mr Mayor, to you, Councillor Hasler, there was 40,000 allocated in this round, and there's approximately 13,000, so 13,000 added to the remaining 40, it should be more than that. I'll take on those and get back to you. Apologies.
Thank you. I now put the motion on in favour. Against? The motion carried. Moving on, item 11.2, which is section 356, small grants. Before I'll let Mr Johns speak to the motion and then I'll call for nominations.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And through you, councillors, this relates to a previous resolution of council last year in relation to the COVID-19 recovery package. Council resolved then to allocate $10,000 into a special access incentive fund, and the purpose of that fund is to, enable business owners in the Shire to improve access to their premises. It's one of those things that during COVID, obviously when cash flow is low, it's something that's difficult to do. So it's great that council has supported this initiative, and essentially this report, as you'll see, seeks your endorsement of the guidelines in the application. And then also to allocate councillors to sit on the advisory group in order to make recommendations to council.
Councillors, as you'll know, Councillor Swain has already been listed and she's the chair of this working group, so I'm calling for nominations for further two positions. Please, I'd like to receive nominations now.
Well, Mr Mayor, I'm happy to nominate Councillor Luke, I believe is also the former chair of the Access Working Group.
Councillor Luke, do you wish to accept the nomination?
I will accept the nomination, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Call for a further nomination for the last position, councillors.
Councillor Wood.
Councillor Hook, you've received a nomination, you're happy to accept?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. So the third point in the recommendation will read that council endorse Councillor Swain, Councillor Luke, Councillor Hook for the purpose of assessing the 2021-22 section 356 small grants access incentive applications. I'll now call for a mover of that recommendation to become the motion.
I do that way, Mr Chairman.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Hasler and seconded by Councillor Fuller. Councillor Hasler, do you wish to speak to the motion as the mover? No. I now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Fuller is the second of the motion. Wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Be the case, I'll put the motion on in favour.
Aye.
Against? Declare the motion carried. Moving on, item 11.3, which is the Waste 2021 Conference. And I'll hand back to Mr Johns to detail the recommendation before you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And through this report seeks a nomination of a councillor to attend the Coffs Waste Conference 2021, which will be held in Coffs Harbour next month.
Councillors, I'll now call for a nomination.
I would like to nominate Councillor Hook to attend the Waste Committee.
Councillor Hook, you've been nominated. Would you like to accept the nomination?
I would be delighted to accept. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, we have one nomination. I'll call for any further nominations. Is it contested? Other nominations? No one else wants to talk rubbish? Be the case, councillors, so we now have a recommendation that reads the council appoint Councillor Hook to attend the Waste 2021 Conference in Coffs Harbour 3 to 7 in May 2021. Councillor Luke, you're moving the motion?
I am.
Calling for a seconder. Councillor Moses. Councillor Luke, would you like to speak to the motion?
Only to say that there was a recommendation that a councillor that was on the Waste and Recycling Services Working Group, it is a desirous conference to attend, and I was going to attend myself. However, it's over a week being, or sorry, over 5 working days being away, but Councillor Hook is also very interested in attending this conference, so it would be great that we've got an enthusiastic councillor to go with the staff over to the conference in Costa Harbour.
Thank you, Councillor Luke. Do I have an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question? Councillor Moses, as a second to the motion, used to speak.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Be the case, I'll put the motion on favour. Against? Declare that motion carried. Moving on. Item number 11.4, Murray-Darling Association 77th Annual Conference. And Mr Johnson to detail the recommendation.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Through you, as the Mayor said, this report seeks a councillor nomination to attend the Murray-Darling Association Conference being held in Wentworth in May.
Thank you, Mr Johns. I now call for nominations. Councillor,
I'd like to nominate yourself, Councillor Chaffey.
thank you for the nomination and I gratefully accept that opportunity. Call for any further nominations. No further nominations. I'll call a second time just for clarity since I'm one of the first nominations. No? Terrific. Then the recommendation will read that council endorse the attendance of Councillor Jay Campbell and Councillor Jay Chappie at the 77th Murray-Darling Association National Conference from 16th to the 19th of May 2021 in Wentworth, New South Wales. And Councillor Hook, you'd like to move that recommendation?
I'll move that motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
I now call for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Hook, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Just to congratulate both of you for attending that conference. I think it's one of the most important conferences that this council can attend, and looking forward to the report that comes back from the conference. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hook. Do I have a local member who'd like to speak against the motion and ask a question? Councillor Fuller, as a second in the motion, you wish to speak?
Yeah, thanks, Mr
Be
Mayor.
the case, put the motion on favour?
Aye.
Against? Unanimously supported. Councillors, the next item on the agenda, I have a declaration as does Councillor Swain and O'Keefe. I will now be leaving the chair. The Deputy Mayor, Councillor Hook, will now be presiding over this next item.
Thank you, Councillors. Ms Markey, it may be noted that Councillor Chappie has left chambers, and I shall bring to your attention item number 11.5, the submission, inquiry into prudential regulation of investment in Australia's export industry. Over to Mr Johns for our recommendation.
Thanks, Mr Deputy Mayor. Through you, councillors, the federal government has recently announced an inquiry into the prudential regulation of investment in Australia's export industries. Mining sector, as you would have read in the report, has invested billions of dollars and supports thousands of jobs in our region, has done for many years. This report and the draft submission that was attached to the report seek to highlight that restrictions on Australia's export industries' access to banking, insurance and superannuation services would potentially have a significant impact on our side. The report and the draft submission doesn't seek to, I guess, address the environmental or planning merits of any mine, but simply to, I guess, focus on the impact that the proposed changes or the proposed changes in that industry could potentially have on our economy and also the economies of many other towns and cities across regional Australia.
Thank you, Mr Johns. I now call on Councillor Hasler. You're happy to move the motion?
No, I'll be doing the following motion, Mr Chairman, that Councillor one doesn't necessarily have one, just proceed and make it before. That's the motion on the.
Do we have a second for that motion? Councillor Fuller, you second for that motion. Can we just wait until this Markey puts that?
See, it was no action.
Are you happy with the wording?
Are you happy with that wording, Councillor Hasler?
I'm happy with that wording. I mean, my only little extra we could put in is that no action as a two, but the fact that we don't say any action means that. If you want to add that one,
Councillor Fuller,
Yeah, I'm happy.
seconder.
Yep, happy with that, Mr Mayor. Yep.
Councillor Hasler, would you like to speak to your motion?
most assuredly, Mr Chairman, there would be no way that I would be on this particular topic prepared to support something which I've see it as being retrospective. And without any consultation with our community on a subject which is quite controversial, it ignores the fact that this topic is extremely important to not only our nation but internationally, and many communities or many countries have adopted policies on climate change and the use of fossil fuels going forward. And whilst we realise that it's important in the Gunnedah community, the Gunnedah community is part of the wider community, and that there is the wider community, from every indication I supports the fact that alternative energy sources are the way to the future. We've had that only yesterday with the Prime Minister making a statement supporting the fact that they're moving more distant a figure in 2050. We've got documentation from organisations like the ANZ Bank, and a reminder we've got to stated earlier tonight in the presentation, the ANZ chief saying this is good old-fashioned risk management. This week we've seen announcements from some of our biggest coal markets, for example, like Japan. We just can't sit and ignore it. And this is what's been taking place across the nation. We have other articles that you follow with interest with this topic. The Treasury, New South Wales Treasury projects coal industry to decline over the next 40 years, taken from April 19th Burton Sydney Morning Herald by Peter Hammond, talking about coal mining in the Hunter Valley is set to decline, possibly rapidly in the coming decades. And they and communities like Muswellbrook have been planning for the post-mining period for some time. And I think this is what we need to be doing in this community and the wider community. The report in the council papers, it doesn't recognise that the world is committed to the need to decarbonise and have net zero emissions by 2050. More significantly, 50% of that production must be by 2030 if we are to minimise the worst effects of climate change. The letter proposed gives no recognition of this fact and what the implications for our residents and Mayfair will be if we fail to adequately decarbonise. The financial markets are doing what the politicians of this country have not been prepared to do for a decade or more. Pricing carbon for its climate risks. You and your children, grandchildren, should be thankful of what banks have done. And it's interesting that in many cases we support, the market, free market deciding things, and here we are trying to dictate to the market, which is reflecting community concern and the financial implications for them going forward. So I think it's fairly clear that we need to be very careful about this, and we should have consultations with our community. We've seen the announcement today about Chemar and many in our community, and those near the proposed mine. We're very happy about it because of the groundwater implications for them, but also because of the climate change implications and for the farming community in that area. Council should be being visionary and transformative in its planning for now, in the and how we will adapt to the post-coal, just like the Hunter Valley is now starting to do. And I think it's a bit of a head in the sand to say, of course, we're very much impacted at the moment by coal, but that is not going to be here for forever. But what people are saying, 2040, 2050. So, and I read this document on page 60. I go through the list in relation to mining in Whitehaven specifically. There are 8 points there, all highlighting Whitehaven's role, and that they're fully capable, confident, and having the resources to put a case forward in their own right. And that's who should be putting that argument, not this council. Certainly not without consulting with our community. And I certainly would not be supportive of that, and that's why I've moved the adoption of the report and that there be clear understanding of no action will be taken.
Thank you, councillor Hazard. Do I have a councillor who wishes to speak against the motion or ask a question? Councillor Fuller, as the seconder of the motion, do you wish to comment?
Mr Mayor, Mr Deputy, happy with what councillor has put forward. I've been following it and following all of this in the last few months, and I think we need to be looking at clean coal in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. If there is no further comment, then I shall put the motion. All in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. Those against? So what do we have? Councillor Luke, you didn't vote.
No.
You're abstaining?
Yes.
So that means it's a vote against the motion. So can we go again, please, councillors? Those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. So there's 4 to 2. I call the motion